In the shadowy world of the Mafia, how does a rumor have the power to topple a boss? Welcome to James Proctor Mob Stories. We have a fascinating show for you today that you don't want to miss. Coming up next in our series called Legends, we give you the story of John DAmato, whose reign over New Jersey's Decavalcante family ended a plot shrouded in betrayal and controversy. The Decavalcante family has an interesting history. It's been called the Sixth Family. It's also been considered the real-life inspiration for The Sopranos. The reality is it's the only family that's actually from New Jersey, as its headquarters is in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Although it's been around since the early 1900s, it wasn't until Sam the plumber Decavalcante became boss in 1964 that the five families actually considered it a family. So the commission accepted them as being their own family somewhere in the mid-60s. By the time John DAmato became acting boss in 1990, the Decavalcante family had over 50 made guys. They had crews in Jersey, but also they had two crews in New York, one in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn. He has a very complex history, and he wasn't really liked by everybody. There were questions about his allegiance. Was he more loyal to the Decavalcante family, or was he just a pawn of the Gambino boss, John Gotti? Of course, we'll cover his death and why he was killed, and discuss whether or not the rumors of him being bisexual were true, or was it just gossip? Dive deep with us into a tale of power secrets and the ultimate betrayal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. John DAmato was born in 1940 in New York. His criminal record dates all the way back to the 1960s for burglary charges. DAmato was on record with Decavalcante soldier Captain Anthony Tony Carubia and Decavalcante Captain Larry Shorty Shiro. These guys were the Manhattan faction of the Decavalcantes. At the age of 35, John DAmato would become an elected member of the Decavalcantes, and he was sponsored by Anthony Tony Carubia. This was back in 1976 or 77 when the books were open. By 1985, DAmato would be promoted to Cappo, running the New York faction of the Decavalcantes. DAmato became heavily involved in large labor and construction racketeering operations with prominent New Jersey mobsters Jake Amari and Jimmy Palermo, while also involved in illegal gambling and loan sharking with Charles Majuri and Corky Vestola. After the Castellano hit in 1985, the newly promoted Cappo, DAmato, would become close friends with John Gotti. DAmato was a frequent visitor at the Ravenite Social Club, and he hung out with John Gotti in Manhattan restaurants and Regina's nightclub in Manhattan. DAmato and Gotti shared a love for gambling. However, DAmato was hiding a secret, and it was that he was using cocaine. After longtime boss Giovanni Riggi went on to be indicted for labor racketeering and extortion charges in late 1989, Corky Vestola stepped up as the new acting boss of the New Jersey Mafia while Riggi was on trial. It was around this time that rival Gambino crime family boss John Gotti reached out to several members of the family as he didn't want Vestola in as the acting boss. John Gotti and Samuel the Bull Gravano supposedly conspired with DAmato into murdering Vestola, with the understanding the family would back DAmato as the acting boss. Riggi gets convicted of his charges and is sentenced to 15 years in prison in 1990, which meant that Vestola kept running the day-to-day activities. However, his reign as acting boss was short, as he also got charged with extortion charges and got an 8-year sentence. With Riggi and Vestola both behind bars, Riggi promoted DAmato as acting boss of the Decavalcante crime family. This obviously pleased the Gambino family. As far as the Decavalcante family goes, they weren't happy that John DAmato was using Gotti's power to run the family. DAmato was described as being Gotti's pet, and this annoyed everyone. These dynamics make sense when you look at the history of the relationship between New York and the Decavalcante family. It was in the mid-1960s that the Decavalcante family under Sam the plumber Decavalcante was finally recognized as its own autonomous family. Even so, you have to understand that there was still a clear power imbalance between the larger, more organized New York families and the smaller Jersey-born and bred roughneck crew. By the time John Riggi took over the Decavalcante family, he had a diplomatic relationship with the Gambino family and got along well with the new boss John Gotti. However, Gotti looked down upon the family and would refer to Riggi's guys as our farm team. You also have the perspective Decavalcante soldier turned rat, Anthony Rotondo, who said that around the time his father, Vincent Jimmy Rotondo, was gunned down in 1988, Gotti started to close in on the family, suggesting that the Decavalcante family under Riggi had previously been loyal to the Genovese family. Rotondo observed that the Genovese family had expressed a strong desire to claim the Decavalcante family as their own, and that Gotti wanted to make sure that the Genovese under Cin Gigante could not have control over the family. As acting boss, DAmato was serving as the Decavalcante's point man and reporting weekly at the Ravenite Social Club. At some point in 1988, it slipped out that the Decavalcantes were not properly inducting members the right way. They were using props instead of an actual gun, knife, and holy card. They would use a plain deck of cards and burn one of the cards and pretend it was a saint. The Decavalcante family did this because they were concerned about law enforcement busting in on an induction ceremony, and they didn't want to be caught with weapons. Even so, Gotti was upset by this, and he made it known that the whole Decavalcante family had to be re-inducted properly because they weren't inducted the right way. John Riggi in prison was pretty sure it was DAmato who spilled the beans to Gotti about the induction situation. In another unpopular move around 1990, DAmato took most of Brooklyn captain Rudy Ferrone's soldiers from him and gave them to other captains. Ferrone was an alcoholic and was particularly abusive towards his crew. Ferrone supposedly never forgave DAmato for it, and this is probably a big reason for him pushing to get DAmato killed before a formal administration meeting could be held to decide his fate. DAmato was seen as a wild, womanizing character that had girlfriends on the side, and he loved to gamble. It was said that he borrowed money from the Decavalcantes, Colombos, and Gambinos and didn't pay it back. In addition, he was snorting a lot of coke and started frequenting Manhattan sex clubs with his girlfriend Kelly. On the night of December 11, 1990, FBI agents and New York City detectives swooped down on the Ravenite Social Club and arrested John Gotti, Sammy Gravano, and Frank Locascio on racketeering charges. Much of the evidence was contained within the Ravenite tapes, which were conversations recorded between John Gotti and other gangsters in the apartment above the Ravenite Social Club. In fact, John DAmato had been caught on the bugs in the apartment of the Ravenite with Gotti and Gravano discussing Mafia business. DAmato thought that he would be next to get arrested, so he decided to go on the lam and hid out in Florida for almost a year. With John DAmato in Florida, members of the Decavalcante family suspected DAmato of being an informant and were quickly growing tired of an acting boss that wasn't liked. One of the last supporters left in the Decavalcante family was Anthony Cappo. Cappo was his driver and bodyguard, but stayed back in New Jersey instead of going to Florida with DAmato. Cappo had been close to John DAmato's brother, Frankie Sockets, who were loan sharking partners in the 1980s. Cappo considered DAmato a very good friend, and it was DAmato that pushed for Cappo to become a made member of the Decavalcante family after the Fred Weiss hit. In early 1992, John DAmato's Brooklyn girlfriend, Kelly, told Anthony Cappo how she witnessed DAmato giving oral sex to a large black man at a sex club on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Cappo was both shocked and angry about this because DAmato was a leader of men, and in that life you can't be gay and be a mafia boss. After Kelly spilled the beans to Anthony Cappo, he reported John DAmato's rumor of being gay to his captain, Anthony Rotondo, and also Gambino soldier, Jimmy Cerullo. He was a family friend that was tight with Cappo's father-in-law. The rumor never went directly from Kelly to the Decavalcante leadership, but went through Cappo. Rotondo then goes to the other Decavalcante administration leaders and tells them what Anthony Cappo told him. Jake Amari and Stefano Vitabile were the two members of the administration Rotondo spoke with, and they said to bring Anthony Cappo in and have him tell them what was told to Rotondo. This sit-down occurs with Anthony Rotondo bringing Anthony Cappo to a New Jersey construction site, and when Cappo repeats the story Kelly told him, both Amari and Vitabile were disgusted by this and couldn't believe it. However, they did know that DAmato was a known party guy that liked to gamble and abuse cocaine, and they felt it was obvious he was living a double life. Rotondo later on in court documents said that DAmato was ignoring the rest of the family leadership and making decisions without including them. Amari and Vitabile felt that DAmato was going to make a move to take over the family permanently from John Riggi. They didn't like DAmato. There's also a rumor, which I believe is possible, that Anthony Cappo was actually having an affair with DAmato's girlfriend Kelly. It's ironic that Kelly would even talk to Cappo. about what she had supposedly witnessed. Anthony Cappo and Rotondo both said that family leaders Stefano Vitabile and Vinnie Palermo both approved the killing, but knew the hit would be a very delicate matter. They were making plans to kill him without permission, which they knew would not be taken positively in New York. Captains Anthony Rotondo and Vinnie Palermo met with acting underboss Jake Amari while DAmato was still out of town. Amari wanted to hold a full administration meeting, which meant to have a vote on what to do with DAmato, but before that could happen, DAmato came home. So Amari went ahead and gave the contract without having the administration meeting. It's January 1992, and John DAmato is spending time with Kelly at her house in Brooklyn. When he's ready to leave, he calls Anthony Cappo. Cappo has Victor DiChiera take him to pick up DAmato from Kelly's house. With Victor in the back seat and Cappo in the passenger seat, John DAmato sits down in the back seat of DiChiera's white Lincoln. Cappo then turns around and shoots John DAmato, killing him instantly. DiChiera drives Cappo and DAmato's body to Rudy Ferrone's mill basin garage. Vinnie Palermo is waiting with Rudy Ferrone in the garage. Originally, Rotondo was supposed to also be there to help dispose of the body, but he backed out at the last minute. In the garage, they all clean DiChiera's Lincoln the best they can, and while going through the pockets of DAmato, they find $5,000 in cash, and believe it or not, an FBI agent's business card in his wallet. DiChiera decides to get rid of the white Lincoln, and he takes the $5,000 from DAmato's wallet and buys another car. As far as DAmato's body, they roll him up in a rug, and then Ferrone and Palermo drive DAmato's body upstate to a longtime Decavalcante soldier named Phil the Undertaker, and that was the last time DAmato was ever seen. Officially, DAmato's listed as missing because the body's never been recovered, but everybody knows that he's dead. The next day, there was an administration meeting where the allegations of DAmato's sexual behavior and other things were brought forward by Jake Amari. Even though DAmato was already clipped, Amari and Vitabile went through the motions of putting things to a vote, and the captains and the attendants voted to clip him. They did not tell the other captains that they had already killed DAmato, and this was done because the killing of a boss, even an acting boss, requires commission approval. So what ends up happening to everybody involved in the conspiracy? In 2003, Capos Philip Phil Abramo, Giuseppe Pino Schifaletti, and the reputed consigliere Stefano Vitabile were charged in organizing various crimes, including the murder of DAmato. Reputed men involved in the murder conspiracy who became informants, Palermo, Cappo, and Rotondo, would later testify about this murder against their former associates. In 2006, Abramo, Schifaletti, and Vitabile were sentenced to life in prison. So what did the assassination of DAmato do to the Decavalcante family? The acting underboss at the time during the mid-90s, Jake Amari, becomes acting boss. The dynamics changed somewhat in the mid-90s as there was a big sit-down over the family having a social club in a Manhattan territory that the Gambinos said was their territory. The Decavalcante family had been recruiting guys from Brooklyn and New York, and as a result of the sit-down, they were told they could no longer recruit from New York, but they could keep their 2 crews they already had in the city. Amari died from cancer around 1997, and although the family was officially ran by John Riggi until 2015, it went through a series of acting bosses and ruling committees, and the family got decimated by arrests and informants, especially with Vinnie Ocean Palermo, who was the first acting boss to ever cooperate. As we conclude, what is the nature of true power and loyalty within the Mafia? It seems like there were no good guys in this story. I think that the story of John DAmato being bisexual and caught engaged in a homosexual act was made up by Kelly. I think this was an excuse to get rid of an acting boss that had gotten too close to John Gotti and the Gambino family. We know that John DAmato wasn't well liked, and he wasn't particularly effective, and he did have moral issues. However, those issues were more related to gambling and cocaine use. What's your take on the complex legacy of John DAmato? Was it justice served, or was it a case of rumors gone too far? Share your perspectives below, and remember to like and subscribe for more in-depth explorations in the world of organized crime. Thank you for watching. Take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.